world full of stories. How does one author make their book stand out from the rest? Book trailers for authors. Breathtaking movie-style trailers that bring your book to life. Stunning cinematic video, epic royalty-free music. Packages starting at less than $200. Book trailers for authors. Makes a great gift for the writer in your life. Find us on Facebook at Book Trailers for Authors.
You are listening to the Barely Audible podcast. Hello and welcome to the Barely Audible podcast. I am your host, Justin Romine, joined with my co-host, Bearz. Today, we have Larry Kirwan from Wexford, Ireland, currently living in New York City. Welcome, Larry.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you. Doing well. Thanks for being here. A little bit of history on Larry. He has been at the forefront of Irish rock music for many years. He toured the world with his band Black 47, and Black 47 was kind of influential in that Irish rock movement that kind of came out with the Dropkick Murphys and all of those really awesome bands. Black 47 is cited as their biggest influence. Larry is not only a musician, but he's a prolific writer, and he is currently working on plays. Larry, tell us how you ended up in New York City in, what was it, the 70s?
Yeah, I just decided to get out of Ireland and see what would happen to me if I came to New York with like $100 or whatever and throw myself right into the scene. It was a time when the American government allowed you to do that, to come here for the summer, and they would give you a Social Security number.
Wow.
You could work for the summer with the idea of going back to Ireland to finish your education, such as it was. But what happened was a lot of people, including myself, came over and didn't go back. And eventually got legal here in some form or other. And the great thing was, having the Social Security number, you could work. And so that's how I came. And I went back and came back with a friend of mine, Pierce Turner. Yes. We started a band called Turner and Kirwan of Wexford. We toured the country, and we had records out. In fact, we had the first song about lesbianism to get national airplay in the U.S. So that's how it kind of started.
Yeah, and Pierce is still around and playing and stuff, and I've been following him for quite a long time too. So how did Black 47 get started? Did you meet Chris Byrne first, and then you kind of started playing together?
Yeah, I had been playing with Pierce in various bands, including Turner and Kirwan of Wexford. And then, because we got involved in the whole CBGB scene, we went punky and had a band called Major Thinkers,
right?
AKA Major Drinkers. And we got a big record deal with Epic Records, and toured the country doing their thing. And we had a minor hit called Avenue B is the Place to Be. It was actually a big hit in the dance halls. And then we got dropped by Epic, and we came to a part of the ways. I had decided that I wanted to really put my time into playwriting, which I'd always kind of done on the side. And so for 4 years, this is in the mid 80s, towards the 90s, I worked nonstop as a playwright, learning the trade, just learning how to do everything from lighting to, directing, casting, producing. And I had 5 plays that were done in that period of time, but I began to feel like I was missing being on stage myself. And one night I took a walk uptown. I was going up to a place called Eamon Doran's. But on the way, I passed by a bar called Paddy Riley's, and there was a band playing in there called Beyond the Pale. And I'd heard of them, so I figured I'd go in and check it out. And I had only been playing improv music in the meantime. I'd given up rock music or folk music, everything. And I got called up to join the band on stage, and I really didn't want to do it, but the barmaid gave me a couple of shots of whiskey, and I went up, and I had a great time. And at the end of the night, I was hanging out with Chris, who had been a fan of Major Thinkers, and he wasn't in a good mood. And I said, "What's the problem?" And she said, "Well, this band is breaking up tonight. I got a young family," and he was a New York City cop. And he said, "And I got all these gigs to do in the Bronx. I got no one to do them with." And I said, "I'll do them with you." And we just got talking and what the band will be about. I had the name Black 47 because it was something that my grandfather used to talk about, the famine years in Ireland, 1847 being the worst of them. So the people called it Black 47. And so that was the title of the band. That was the name of the band. And then both of us were very political. And we decided there was a real opening for a band that would just deal with politics. And not just politics, but that would be politically oriented. The Clash had broken up, and Bob Marley was dead, and it just seemed like there was an opening there. And so we headed up to the Bronx, and as I've said before, everyone hated us because we had decided that as quickly as possible we'd become an all-original band. In the Bronx in those days, you had to do 4 1-hour sets a night. So we didn't have time to rehearse or anything. And we just wrote down every song we knew and picked out the songs that the two of us thought we knew. And we figured that we'd only need 3 sets because anybody who was there for the first set would not be there for the 4th, given that we hadn't practiced much or anything. So we had our 3 sets, and we went up there and played, and we were very different. It was Chris was playing the uilleann pipes and baron and various whistles.
And you incorporated a drum machine.
I had a drum machine that I was using a lot at that time for different musical theater projects, and I was pretty good at programming. So and I was playing an electric guitar too, so it was kind of a strange mixture of sounds, and then we were both singing, and Chris was a rapper. And I was singing, so people didn't know what to make of it, and they were pretty aggressive about what they wanted to hear at that point. Christy Moore and U2 and the Waterboys were big, and they wanted to hear those songs. And I remember early on someone saying to me, "Play U2." I remember saying, "The next time you see Bono, ask him, is he playing any Black 47? And if he is, we'll learn a U2 song." The guy goes, "What?" But that was the give and take with the audience. And it wasn't, I'm smiling at this point, but it wasn't done in smiling terms at that point. So we got fired every night, but one of the amazing things that helped us was that there was a recession going on. And a lot of Irish people had bought bars in the boom times that were before the recession in the mid-'80s. And the Bronx is an unusual place in New York City in that the people up there want live music. They don't necessarily want to listen to it, but they have to have live music in the bars. So there was so many bars, and a lot of people going back to Ireland because of the recession. So there was a shortage of bands. And as we get fired from one place, the place down the street would hire us. And we were playing in an area called Bainbridge Avenue and 204th Street, where there was probably about 40 or 50 bands within a quarter of a mile, or pubs within a quarter-mile radius. So we had a lot of time to fail, by the time we got to all these bars. And of course, we got better as we were going along, and we instantly started to record. The band played its first gigs in October 1999, and we had a cassette EP released in around Christmas time or January 1990. So right from the start, we had original music, a lot of original music, and I wrote nonstop at that point, and Chris wrote too. And within 6 months, we were a functioning all-original band. But those 6 months were hard going, If you can survive the Irish working class bars of the Bronx as they were then, it's a total different scene up there now. I remember we got to open for the Pogues in March of that year, and it was in New York, so it went pretty well. But we went over to open for them in London for their Christmas tour in 1990. And I remember the first night coming out on stage, and the whole place is shouting, "We want Shane, we want the Pogues," whatever. And we were just so used to aggression at the time that I went over and I turned up my amplifier to 11. I turned up all the effects, and then I hit a big open E chord, and the Pogue soundman we hadn't gotten a sound check, so they didn't know. They thought we were a folk band or something, so you had everything pretty loud. The sound went through the audience. So everyone was like that, And up until about 10, 15 years ago, I used to run into people and say, you wrecked my hearing at that gig at the Pogues. I said, yeah, well, fuck you, man, Why didn't you give us a better greeting? That's the way we were. We were like boxers, with aggression. We met aggression with aggression, and so right from the start, Black 47 had this pugnacious kind of a feel, which was to suit us well because we were political. So we were crashing into people all the time. I remember at one point there was 3 different governments we were fighting with: the U.S., the British, and the Irish government. Just over different matters.
Jeez.
So
yeah, and so going back to Wexford, when you were a kid, I think I remember from reading Green Suede Shoes, your memoir. You took the stage and was singing traditional, like Irish songs and stuff to the people there, right?
Yeah, I always had an interest in. I was very rock and roll oriented. Wexford was a rock town, basically because so many people had emigrated to London, and when they would come home on summer holidays or Christmas holidays, as everyone did, they brought back singles with them, particularly rockabilly singles from the 50s and 60s, because Wexford people also like to dance, and rockabilly music suited the style. So I was brought up on rockabilly, but I was also brought up on Irish traditional singing, not jigs and reels, though, but the actual long form traditional songs. When they're in Gaelic, they're called sean-nós, and when they're in English, as was the way in Wexford, they were just called long form songs, and they would describe a battle or, a murder that had taken place. They were pretty similar in ways to the Appalachian murder ballads.
Yeah.
They were long form. And you go into a bar in the countryside and an old guy would be singing, and there might be 20 verses to the song. And the whole place would be listening because there'd be a payoff in the end. It was like a way of passing down history. So I got familiar with that style of music as a young guy. Most young people weren't into it at that point, but I guess I was always kind of into stories, In fact, when Black 47 then started, because we were writing at such a ferocious rate at the start, up for the first year or so, I didn't realize it, but I was actually... all the songs I was written were character driven because I'd come from 4 years of solidly writing plays at this point. So of course in plays, everything is character driven. So with the songs, I didn't realize it, but I'd changed my whole style of songwriting. It wasn't until we started getting, criticisms or critics were, evaluating the music that they started to point out all the songs are character driven. But I guess that went back to Wexford too, the long form of the song.
Yeah, one of the things I appreciate about your Black 47 songwriting is that a lot of the time you are speaking in that character's first person. Instead of singing about them and their history, you sing from their perspective. And I always enjoyed that about Black 47.
Yeah, I think we were the first band to introduce the inner monologue. So you take the song, say, James Connolly. There's a guy describing in normal terms, what Connolly was about and how he led this revolution in 1916 in Ireland. But then in the middle of it, it breaks into Connolly's thoughts. Mm-hmm. And the whole song takes a jump, and even the beat changes at that point. And the key... And the key stays the same, but I just play different style chords to show that there's a difference happening between the declarative kind of song that is normal and Connolly's inner feelings, which is something that you learn as a playwright just by, Shakespeare used it with his soliloquies. So that became part of a style of writing. And again, I wasn't even thinking that I was doing that. It just, because I was writing plays at the same time, you do have characters having inner monologues in plays, but that hadn't been anything that had been done much anyway. In fact, I'm trying to think of who else had done that at the time. It generally wasn't done. So we introduced that form into the rock genre, I'd say.
There's one thing I wanted to share with you. A couple weeks ago, I have a lot of different music on my Apple Music playlist and stuff, and we were driving around town, and Elvis Presley's Blue Suede Shoes came on, and my 8-year-old daughter Helena said, "Hey, Dad, did Elvis write this song in did Elvis write this song because your friend Larry's song, Green Suede Shoes?
That's great. That's really fun.
And I busted up laughing, kind of explained to her the history of blue suede shoes and how that kind of influenced you. And so I cracked up. I told our friend Bill Nevins about it. I texted him and told him about it. He got a kick out of that too.
But here you go back again to the Wexford influence was that rockabilly influence. Blue Suede Shoes is such a great song to me, and then there was a movement in the 50s in Ireland and England called Teddy Boys, who dressed in a certain style. They were called Teddy Boys because they dressed in an Edwardian style, where the coat comes down almost to the knees. Your coat does. Your suit coat, come down to well down past the thighs. And the Teddy Boys did this, except what they did was they took what they called their drapes, and they had them all different colors, whereas the Edwardians had very sober colors. So in Wexford became a big Teddy Boy town, and all the Teddy Boys fought in gangs, but they also listened to rockabilly music. So when I started playing with Black 47 as a distinctive thing, I started to wear green suede shoes, and Doc Martens caught on to Black 47, and they gave me, and Jeff, actually, the saxophone player, they gave me green suede pointed shoes. That was another big Teddy Boy thing. And they gave Jeff red ones. So I think because Jeff is English, and Elvis Costello had that song, The Angels Want to Wear My Red Shoes. So you take all the influences in your life and then you put them up on stage. I think that was the punk thing too.
How did you get hooked up with Jeffrey? Jeffrey Blythe. He was in Dexy's Midnight Runner, right?
Yeah. I met Jeff through his wife. His wife was an old friend of mine, and she ran into me one day in the park and said, you got a new band, right? It's doing well up in Paddy Riley's. She said, Jeff's gone nuts. He's over here sitting around me all night, and he'd just like to be out playing. And I just said, send him up. We got a trombone player, so he can just join in. And so Jeff came on and he said, well, do you want me to play then? I said, I don't know, man. Just get up there, play whatever comes to mind. He said, great. Oh, first time I ever had to do that. I said, there's plenty of drink, don't worry. He said, great. That would really help. And that's how the Black 47 brass sound started. We didn't want to do a section. There's in brass, like the great black sections, like Otis Redding had the greatest one. But I never thought it would suit the style of music we were playing to have, as much as I loved the black section playing, what we thought we would do is that the three lead instruments would be the trombone, the saxophone, and the uilleann pipes, and that they would give the lead lines rather than have me playing the guitar line, which is what would naturally be the way in bands at that time. So the way we did it then was I'd come up with a melody in the middle of the song as an intro and then as a break, and then whichever instrument led off, the other two would play counter or harmonies to it. And I always felt too, it was one of the things that really worked out for Black 47, that I'll write this song storyline, right? And then there will be a place in the song, often at the end, where that storyline is taken over instrumentally and is interpreted by the instruments. And that became a signature thing with Black 47. And it was one of the reasons we were able to play for 25 years continually, because the instrumental could change from night to night. I mean, there would be the original line that I'd given, and you would hear that would keep playing at some point, or would start off with it, and then gradually, as the guys, the three lead players, as whatever mood they were in that night, that would lead them to add to the story. And of course, what the audience was hearing, the audience were dictating a little bit what it was too, in that at Black 47 shows, the audience and the band were very united after the first, 20 minutes or so. So the audience, in essence, they didn't dictate what we were playing, but they definitely had an influence over what we were playing, just by sheer osmosis, by being close to us.
Yeah, and then you also spent quite a bit of time at Malachi McCourt's bar, Bells of Hell. How did you get hooked up with him, and could you tell the story of his brother Frank, who was the author of Angela's Ashes and Teacher Man and all those great books? Could you tell us the story when he took his students to the Bells of Hell?
Well, the Bells of Hell was just a very unique bar. It was owned originally by Malachi McCourt, and then his head bartender, Peter Myers, took it over eventually. Malachi went off the booze and everything and wanted to be away from drinking. Pierce and I were playing out in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, and we were living out there part of the time, and we became big in that area and in the various Irish bars there. But we wanted a place to play regularly in New York. So Malachi had a big back room that nobody ever used, and so we went in one night and we got really high, as people did in those days, and we flipped a coin which of us would do the approaching to Malachi, and the other one would play backup. That's how we did it a lot of the time. So I won or lost, as the case may be, and I was the one who had to put spiel in. So we watched Malachi, and Malachi, of course, is always talking to different people. And we saw an opening, and I ran over, and I started to talk, and I guess we'd gotten some really wild pot. I couldn't stop talking. Where it was, I was telling him how great we were and everything. And finally, my voice gave out, and Malachi had stood there through this 5-minute barrage. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, gentlemen," he said, "I have a room in the back that is dark at the moment, and whenever, if an evening happens that Madison Square Garden can give up your services, why don't you come down and play for us?" We're going, "Does that mean we got a job?" And he said, "Yes, of course. I'm not going to pay you much, but you have to draw the crowd, and then we'll see where it goes." And that's when we started playing in the Bells of Hell, and we played there for years. When we weren't on the road, we played there. That was the thing we always did in New York, was that we had a place to play, and we kept that going with Black 47. So that if we weren't on the road, we would have a place where we could play Fridays and Saturdays, and that would essentially pay, back in those days, for your living expenses.
Yeah.
So one day, the question you asked me about Malachi's brother Frank, Frank was a teacher in a high class Stuyvesant town, or Stuyvesant High School was for super achievers, and Frank got this gig there teaching English, and he was very close to his students. So one afternoon, traditionally a lot of us would meet in the Bells of Hell in the afternoon, and the drink was pretty free or cheap, and it was kind of like a writer's happy hour, and we're all in there, and then the door opens and this kid walks in, another kid and another kid. We're all about 15, 16. And finally, and they line up, and in comes Frank McCourt, who is Malachi's brother, and I knew pretty well. And we all turn around to look, see, this kid's going to hold us up or something, you know? Frank said, "So you want to be writers? Look at the end result." That was us at the bar. I was thinking, wow, so witty. And, he actually took his students around the city, teaching them English and appreciation of writers and whatever. And then he took them into a bar to actually meet writers and see the downfall of writing, which is usually drinking.
And so, Bearz, you have, a couple Irish songwriters and stuff too, right?
Oh, Bob O'Malley and I think Seamus O'Reilly, yes. Two well-known singer-songwriters. Of course, their downfall was they became alcoholics and had to get a job at KFC because it's the only place they could be creative. I'm sure Larry probably knew my friends Stan Snadowski and Alan Pepper at the Bottom Line.
Yes, indeed. Actually, you look very familiar to me. Were you in the Bottom Line a lot?
Well, yeah, from time to time, and my editor was that alternative poetry and fiction, Andrew Gettler from the Bronx.
Andrew what?
Gettler.
Yeah, I know the name. Yeah, Andy Gettler. Yeah.
Yeah, and we used to hang out at Allen Ginsberg's farm all the time and go up there and, just do what we did up there and be inspired by everyone we met up there as well.
Alan used to live on 6th Street, was it?
Yeah.
And between A and B, or First and A. I used to pass him by all the time because when I was younger and better looking, Alan always gave young guys passing by the eye. So,
I'm sure he wanted to give them more than just the eye,
Yeah. I got used to it. It didn't bother me, but I think it bothers other people.
It probably freaks out a lot of people, especially back then, who weren't comfortable,
Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Larry. Have you ever dealt with Van Morrison?
I've been in the same room with him and played festivals with him, but as much as I admired him, I knew the type of person he was, and I never spoke to him because he's very much a fuck off kind of a guy, So I never gave him the opportunity to tell me to fuck off, I guess. I do admire him a lot. I admire his music a huge amount, but the person I've seen is, not the nicest person. I'm sure he is to people around him, and I knew his daughter. His daughter is very nice, and his manager, they were all nice. But Van is, he's just a sticky personality. Yeah. But at the same time, his Astral Weeks album is still my favorite album. Yeah? It's like, I don't think anything has beaten it, even in the jazz world. It's like, it's still there. Still an amazing feat.
Yeah, and Moondance was a phenomenal album as well.
Well, it's really incredible if you think about, where he came from at the time and how he managed to get from his original point to where he is now. I mean, it was quite the odyssey and quite the journey for him.
Yeah.
I contributed to one of his songs, Real, Real Gone. My contribution was Fingertips Touching Face.
Oh, yeah.
And I was certain, like, at some point he was going to credit me or be like, here, Bear, here you go. This is nice of you. Thank you. But, lots of life has happened in between, right? But it's just nice to have that knowledge that, we connected and I contributed to one of his songs. And for a kid back then, that was, quite the achievement, right?
How did that come about? How did it come about?
Well, I just kind of like met him in the Woodstock area, and one thing led to another. And because he always hung out on the periphery he was always in the orbit of the beats, of the poets. And about, I think, what was years ago, City Lights released his collection of lyrics, right? Do you remember that? I think we just...
I didn't know that. I love City Lights. I always go there. I'm in San Francisco.
Welcome back, Justin. We just...
Lawrence Ferlinghetti's place. Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Larry, I'm curious, some of your influences. I grew up watching The Twilight Zone, and that's way out of my era, but Rod Serling and Richard Matheson are two of my biggest influences on my writing. I'm wondering if Rod Serling, since he was so socially conscious, I'm wondering if his writing kind of spurred you on at all.
Yeah, I mean, I love that show. It was shown in Ireland when I was growing up, and so I've watched every one of the shows. I'm not aware that he was an influence, but I've had so many influences, so he probably was, because just certain of the scenes that he wrote jump immediately to mind.
Yeah.
There's one in particular that always, a guy who really wanted to read. Remember that one?
Time Enough at Last with Burgess Meredith.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, of course, in the end, he's the last person on Earth, and all, you can read everything, but then his glasses break. Jesus. That affected me for years.
That's one of my favorites as well. Yeah. So,
influenced a lot by Yeats, William Butler Yeats.
Yeah.
Still am. In fact, I used some of his titles in Fanatic Heart, that Big Black 47 song. I got that from him, just the name of it. But yeah, I very much into... I like poetry a lot. I still read it from time to time. But, I'm influenced by James Joyce, as everyone is. And, Lawrence Durrell is someone most people wouldn't think that I was influenced by, but his Alexandrian Quartet, that was a huge influence. But, I got so many of them. It's like, I read voraciously as a boy, and still pretty much do, but I always preferred reading to watching TV. So I've only actually started to watch TV recently
well, you're home more now.
Yeah, it's also something to do, with my wife, to watch a series or something, we share that. Whereas if you're sitting there reading, you're not particularly sharing it.
Engaging, yeah.
You're not engaging, yeah.
Yeah, so Black 47 kind of blew up in the, what was it, the early 90s.
Yeah.
And you had a video on MTV. You were playing all of the night shows, Leno and O'Brien and all those. How did that affect the band?
It was great for the band because it meant TV was such a big thing at that point, and there wasn't streaming. So the big channels, if you were on one of the big channels, you were going to be known nationally and internationally probably too. So it was great like that, I'm not sure what cultural effect it had on us, except it meant that you had a following in every small town in the country, in every city. So you could go anywhere and play. And we began to get our own following that was kind of political edged, and but also they like to party. Black 47 was a big party band, and so when we would come into town, it was an excuse for people to go out of their heads, and a lot of alcohol, and with the band there was you didn't have to be sober. You didn't have to be smiling. In fact, the rule was to take your mood on stage and use that to define your music on the night. And there was a lot of improv in Black 47. The only rule as regards drinking or drugs or anything was that you had to be able to deliver. Yeah, you couldn't not deliver. Yeah, you could, as long as you could deliver and deliver well, or deliver innovatively, if not well, then you were okay within the band. But we didn't tolerate drunkenness on stage. Oddly enough, even though we were pretty lit up, and we also didn't like. It only occurred to me recently that we didn't allow drunks in the dressing room, and that's strange. We didn't want that energy taken from us. We didn't want to listen to bullshit. There was a political angle to the band, and a lot of young people got their original entree into politics through the band, and then they would. We weren't telling them you got to think this way or that way. Well, we wanted them to do is think and, and have an opinion. It doesn't have to be our opinion. In fact, you're better off coming up with your own opinions. But we want you to think and have a good time.
Yeah.
It always strikes me when I look back at Black 47, because it's so unusual that we could be doing a rip-roaring song about sex and whatever and partying, and then go into an intense political song, say like about Paul Robeson or something like that, and there was no wall between them, that the subject matter and Black 47 songs, I would have to say, as regards the amount of subject matter, I can't think of that many bands that had anything like that, because we were interested in a lot of different things, and we were interested in a lot of different musics. I mean, you take Fred Parcells, his background was Latin jazz on the trombone. Chris Byrne was Irish traditional and Brooklyn rapping, big ones. And then Jeffrey Blythe was soul music and classical music. And Thomas Hamlin, the drummer, was very much into Afrobeat stuff when he started with us. And I was into everything and was always looking for a way. How do you frame a song? How do you, if you can do it in a introduce different styles of music into it, then you can affect the story of the song by the rhythms you're playing with it. And to not just have songs be in one style, but have a lot of different styles coming in. And then because we were drinking and we didn't rehearse ever, so we rehearsed during sound checks. That's when I would bring in a song and a rough, have a chord chart and just a chart of what the main line was. And then we would run it during the sound check, and then we would run it as soon into the show as possible that night. And the idea wasn't to get it right in any way. It was just to get from point A to point Z in the song. And you could mess up whatever you liked in it, but to get the song across, because we found that way that the next time you played the song, it was almost there. Whereas if you spent a couple of hours working on it in the studio, then you had to translate it onto the stage and everybody's nervous about getting it. We didn't have the option of being nervous. We were just trying to get, how do I get to the end of this where I'm making a total idiot of myself? Was the idea.
It made it look like it was planned.
Yeah, and well, that was the other thing. We learned early on that if you don't react to a mistake, the audience is not going to know it was a mistake. They'll think it was jazz. You know?
And Black 47 played New York pretty heavily, and was it Rolling Stone magazine that called you the house band of New York?
Someone like that, yeah. Yeah, you see, part of it was money, you know. Three of the guys in the band at that point had families. So we were very aware that we came from a very working class kind of a background, in that it was, we play, you pay, you know. In fact, we had lots of problems with record companies expecting us to do, promo gigs. We said, we don't do those, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get paid. You can call it a promo gig, but there's going to be a charge on the way in. In fact, we used to charge the record companies to come in. They would always expect that they were the ones. We're thinking, you're the ones who can actually write it off, you know, as an expense. These punters out there, you know, they're coming in with their $20. They're going to get $5 at the door, and they need 15 to be able to get some drinks into them. You know, so that was the original way we saw it. You know?
And there, I just finished reading Quentin Tarantino's book, Cinema Speculation, and he has kind of a chapter about Steve McQueen. And Steve was kind of notorious for not wanting to read scripts. He hated reading scripts. So he'd have his wife, Neil, read all the scripts for him and kind of filter them out and give him the good ones. He also said, I didn't know this, but in McQueen's kind of later years, he also was charging the studios for him to read a script. He was getting $1 million a script from the studios to read. Yeah. After he had kind of, you know, made his mark, and, you know, in his later years before he passed away, he was getting $1 million just to read a script.
I have a newfound respect for him now. I didn't know that.
I didn't either. Yeah. And so it's been almost, 10 years now since Black 47 stopped playing?
It was 10 years.
10 years?
November 14th.
And so since then, you've obviously been keeping busy, because the creative streak in you doesn't run dry. And so you put together Paradise Square. Can you talk to us a little bit about the play?
Yeah, it began. A lot of the plays I write, or musicals I write, gestate inside me for a long time. They're usually, if you're going to write a play or a musical, you better like the subject matter, because you're going to be stuck with it for a long, long time, and trying to get productions and everything. So Paradise Square originated as a musical called Hard Times, and it was where I am right now. I'm in Soho, Lower Soho in New York City, and if you were to go east from where I live, about 5-6 blocks, is an area called the 5 Points, and I became fascinated with the 5 Points because it was the worst slum in the world. That's what Charles Dickens called it when he saw it. And it was all immigrants, and it was in the 1840s to the 1860s at least. It was a melting pot of Irish and African American, and there was a lot of intermarriage going on. And I found out about this, and I'd always been interested in that, because I knew about the Irish slaves being sent to the Caribbean and intermarrying with the African slaves. So I was just fascinated. This had happened 5-6 blocks from where I live. And around the same time, I found out that Stephen Foster, the great American composer of his time, had lived in that area too when he was down on his luck. Foster had written minstrelsy songs that had he became the biggest proponent of that. And he was only 20 when he had his first big, huge hit called Oh, Susanna. And he had this fantastic career, but he found that the songs that he was writing were being turned into very much anti-Black songs, anti-African American songs, and he quit doing it. And that fascinated me, that here's a guy who had all the money in the world, everything he wanted, and then all of a sudden, by his late 20s, he's a wash-up because he decided not to do this anymore, to write different style songs. So I came up with this idea of a saloon dance hall called Nellie Blythe's, and that came from my after hours experience. There's a whole after hours scene in New York where you go to the Bells of Hell, it will close at 4:00, and then you went to an after hours and you would stay out till well past dawn, oftentimes 10, 11 in the morning, and often these after hours are run by Black women. So I decided to have a Black woman be the kind of hero of this piece, and that Foster would be one of her clients, and that was done in a little theater called The Cell a couple of times on 23rd Street, and got a rave review in the New York Times. And through various things happening, a famous producer called Garth Drabinsky heard about this. He was just out of prison, or not that long out of prison, and he was back in Toronto, and he brought me up to Toronto, and we came to a deal that I would develop Hard Times into a bigger musical. I think Hard Times had 7 actors in it, and he wanted everything on a grand scale. And we got in different people to help out with the music, and eventually with the script and everything. And then we did workshops, and then we did it at Berkeley Rep. And at that point, it was a big success at Berkeley Rep. And then COVID struck. So everything went under for about a year and a half. And then when it was supposed to go from Berkeley straight to Broadway. So then we had to rethink it. In the meantime, Black Lives Matter happened. So that called for a certain rethinking of the script too. And then it ran in the Nederlander, the big place in Chicago, and it was a hit there. And then it came to New York. And then we got hit again on opening night. We got hit with a severe attack of COVID. 32 of us got it at the opening night party. So we had to close down, and then it ran for about 4 months. But that had taken the steam out of it because there was a further attack of COVID that came. So that's the long and the short of it, that story.
The play went on to be nominated for, was it 10 Tonys?
Yeah.
Right? And you were awarded as co-writer, as well. That's got to feel pretty good when you're recognized for that, even though it took that hit during COVID.
Yeah, I thought though that it should have won more of the Tonys. What happened was, in my opinion, was Garth was kind of a hero. Garth Drabinsky is a hero in Berkeley, and definitely a hero in Chicago because he revivified the old theater section there before he went to prison. There was no forgiveness in the theater community for Garth in New York, so the play was being judged, or the musical was being judged by Garth's past rather than by its merits, I thought. I thought we should have won the both the dance and the music awards. I mean, the people who won it were great anyway, won those awards, but I was pretty sure we were going to win 3 of the awards. As it turned out, we won 1. And I think if it had won more, it would have had more armor against the COVID attack that we had and the critical response we were getting in New York. It was a big play. There was too much in it at times. And I agreed with that part of it.
Clearly an oversight was not debuting it in Stephen Foster's hometown of Lawrenceville, Pennsylvania. I mean, can you imagine bringing a show of that magnitude to a very small town in Lawrenceville, right? Have you been to Lawrenceville? It's a great place. I think you'd really enjoy it.
I did, because I got a lot of help from the people who ran the Stephen Foster Museum in Pittsburgh, and so I was down there with that. But oddly enough, the fact that Stephen Foster's statue got pulled down in Lawrenceville, that was one of the because of Black Lives Matter at the time, that was one of the things that we had to kind of rewrite, bring Foster down in the musical, because we were standing a chance of getting ostracized totally. There was so much money put into it at that point. I went along with it. But Foster was such an intricate part of the story, the DNA of the story, that when we took him down in the script, the play suffered because of it. The story suffered because of it. I felt. Not everybody felt that within the creative team, but I felt it.
Wow. Yeah, and so now you sent me a little bit of your current project, Rebel Girl. I did get a chance to read. I read about a quarter of the play and listened to your accompanying music. I'm so glad you're still writing and making music. My kids love Celtic Kids. This morning we were listening to the Billy the Kid, and that, you know, all that took place here, and Lincoln County is just down the road, and we had gone to in Lincoln County they have a big the former jail of the town, and it's where Billy escaped right before he died. And so we took the kids there and we did the tour, and there's bullet holes still on the wall and all kinds of really cool stuff. So my kids are familiar with Billy the Kid, and that came on shuffle this morning on the way to school. So I'm glad you're still making music, because it probably never leaves you. But tell us a little bit about Rebel Girl.
Well, the Rebel Girl was Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and she was this rebel rouser. She gave her first speech at the age of 15 in the Bronx, and by the time she was 18, she was a national figure, because she became one of the leaders of the International Workers of the World, who were also called the Wobblies. And the Wobblies' idea was that instead of there being so many unions everywhere, that there should be just one big union. That was the idea behind the Wobblies. But the U.S. government was really afraid of that, because it was pretty invested in having the two-party style politics we have, and they knew that if there was one big union, that the inevitability then would be that there would be a working class party also, and that would, at that point, there had been the revolution in. Yeah, the play is set between 1912 and 1922. And the First World War happened in that period, and the Russian Revolution. So the U.S. government didn't want any revolutions, peaceful or otherwise, happening in the U.S. So they set out to destroy the Union. And oddly enough, the guy who led the government's war against the Union was someone who would become really famous later. But at that point, he was a young guy called J. Edgar Hoover. And he became the big enemy of the Wobblies. So the Rebel Girl, it's about her life and the people she was involved with, including an Italian anarchist that she lived with for those years, called Carlo Tresca, who was eventually got assassinated in New York by Mussolini and the mob in New York. And she also had a bit of a thing with Joe Hill, the songwriter, the radical songwriter. He was the one who wrote a song called Rebel Girl. So it tracks the relationship between Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and her lover, Carlo Tresca, while at the same time tracking the war that the U.S. government carried on against the International Workers of the World, and it all comes to a head in 1922. So that's the basis of the story. It's a part of American history that's been written out, and I always like finding watershed periods of history. The Paradise Square was the anti-draft rights in New York in 1863. And 1912 to 1922 is probably the most eventful period of American history apart from the Civil War. So, but a lot of it has been just downplayed rather than written out, I suppose.
Isn't it interesting? It's always about power and control in some form or another. I mean, the costumes, the geography just changes slightly a little bit. And yet this whole drama just continues to be churned out and churned out and churned out and churned out until people awaken, right, to what's really going on.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, J.D. Rockefeller was the prime industrialist at that point, he and J.P. Morgan. So they were, I wouldn't say running the country, but they were the powers that be. They were the Elon Musks of their time. And Rockefeller controlled the coal in Colorado. And huge amounts of immigrants went there to work on the coal. Now, in the Colorado statute or state at the time, you could have a union, but Rockefeller forbade unions to work. Anybody in a union could not work in his coal mines. And there was a strike, a huge strike, to get people to join the unions. And he just threw them all out of the company shacks that they lived in. And the union put them up in various places in Colorado, particularly one called Ludlow, in tents. And one night, the state militia, which were kind of controlled by Rockefeller and the Pinkerton Detective Agency, whom he hired, surrounded the Union camp in Ludlow, Colorado, set it on fire, and shot anyone who moved there. And this is a pivotal part of the play. It happens in the first act of the play. And there was a national outcry against this because Rockefeller at this point was teaching Sunday school in New York City while the miners were burning. And there was a national outcry against it. And that's when Rockefeller became a philanthropist. And you still have the Rockefeller Philanthropic Corporation, which does amazing good around the world. But it all happened because of him deciding, I need a change here. I'm being looked on as a monster now, and instead I'll start a philanthropy organization. So, in a certain way, the miners became martyrs for other people who did get money from Rockefeller and continued to get it from the Rockefeller estates in a good way.
Now, that time span that you focus on for that particular piece, it's interesting that that's also a very pivotal time in Irish history. You had 1916 and 1921.
Yeah.
So was it kind of interesting for you when you were doing your research for that did you kind of keep those two time spans together a little bit and were able to kind of feed off of that?
Yeah, you see how I first heard about the Wobblies. I'm kind of left wing anyway, but I wrote two big songs for Black 47. One was about James Connolly, and the other one was about Big Jim Larkin. And they were partners in a union in Ireland. Now, both of them came to the States, and both of them worked for the International Workers of the World. So they were both leaders of that in their own way. And that's how I found out about the Wobblies and the International Workers of the World, through the Irish connection. But then I also knew about them through Joe Hill, because if you're really into folk music, Joe Hill was just one of the great folk writers, radical and political folk writers of the time. So I knew about the Wobblies through that too. And also, if anybody has an interest in it, the movie Warren Beatty made, Reds, deals with that period pretty well too, and deals with the Wobblies are in there. And just the way that America was in ferment at the time, in that a lot of people found that the workers over here, I mean, that's the research that really staggered me, just how poorly they were treated. It was, people were working 70 hours a week, and the children had to work so that families could survive. So in the mills and where people were looking after the looms, women would bring their children in, and the children, because they were small, could be employed. If a loom broke down, a child could get inside it, whereas an adult couldn't. So children were getting mangled, working in the mills. And that's the play starts with the Blood and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. And that was probably the biggest win for the International Workers of the World, winning that, because they were able to stop child labor in Massachusetts and make sure that people wouldn't work 70 hours a week anymore. They could get down to 50 or 60, and get 15% raise on what they were getting, which was subsistence payment anyway. But that's where the play starts from.
And what plans do you have? Is it being produced? Do you have? Is it just at the beginning stages?
It's at the very beginning stages. What I did with this one is I invested a lot of money in it. There's 26 or 27 songs in it, and I went into the studio with a lot of my old comrades, and we made what's essentially an album. I suppose there's 14 of the 26 songs we recorded, and it took a lot of time to do them, to make them sound great, not just be demos. But Paradise Square, we never had anything like that. And with Hard Times, I didn't have it. So now the songs sound really good, and it was an experiment with. One of the great things was between 1912 and 1922, there were so many strands of American music happening at the time, folk and swing and jazz and opera. Because Tresco is Italian, I have his songs, I'll be kind of slightly operatic. So bringing all those threads in and then updating them to what you might hear today. And also putting a heavier influence or insistence on the guitar, because the guitar is not used hugely in musical theater. But it's the most popular instrument still in music in general. And so if you listen to this one, you'll hear a lot of, guitar work as atmospherics in the background, rather than just concentrating on piano, which is usually the main instrument in musical theater.
And then, so we'll be on a lookout for that when it gets produced, and best of luck to you on that. And then before we go, you're also having one of your books reissued coming up.
Yeah, and it's called Rockin' the Bronx, and it's set between 1980 and 1982 in the Irish Bronx, which at that point was around the Kingsbridge Road area of the Bronx. And when I was up there playing at that time, it was such a wild scene, and it lasted up there until about 1992. But say from the 60s, or maybe from the 50s up till 1990, that was the dead center of Irish immigration to the States. And it never really got covered. Even the two Irish papers in New York, the Voice and the Echo, didn't really cover it up there because it was like the Wild West. Everybody was illegal. Everybody was on cash payment, and so everybody worked huge long hours and then party long hours. And there was a music scene that was created just for them. Now, the guys were all working on the buildings and construction, and the women were Irish nannies. And so it tells the story of people from that era in that area of the Bronx. And the book originally came out in 2010 on an Irish publishing group called Brandon Group. And the owner of that, Steve McDonough, was a good friend of mine. I was totally into it, but he dropped dead suddenly, and the whole, there was no real publicity done for the book. And then I was on the road with the band. It was just one of those things. But I always wanted the book to get out because in 2010, the scene had already gone, but now 14 years later, it's history. And I knew that I'd probably be the only one who ever wrote about it because I was up there. I didn't live there, but I was a part of the scene. And I just knew that nobody else was going to do it. So to me, it's an important book because it shows what was going on at that time, which takes in the death of John Lennon, that's between 1980 and 1982, the death of Bobby Sands. So there was a lot happening in the Irish world of New York at that point. And I'm really looking forward to it coming out again. It's coming out on Fordham University Publishing. They read it and liked it and thought it really suited them. It's about the Bronx and everything too. So yeah, that's out on March 4th, and I'll definitely be doing some readings and getting it out there again publicly.
I still have a copy of that book.
Oh, you do? Oh, good.
I wonder if it's worth any money now that it's out of print.
I would say,
eBay.
It's look at it, and you can. Even the secondhand copies tend to cost a good bit now.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining us, Larry. We could probably talk for another couple hours.
Yeah.
It's nice catching up with you. I've known you for about 25 years, so definitely great to see that you're still flourishing in the creative arts. And, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. Hopefully we'll get, some of your fans to tune into the podcast when it's released in a couple of weeks. So
yeah, well, make sure you get it out to the different Black 47 and Celtic Crush. I'll mention it on that show.
Thanks, Larry. We will keep in touch, and I'll let you know when this hits, and you can send it to all your friends. And
I will indeed.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
You. Have a great holiday. Much love, brother.
Yeah, and say hello to your kids for me, all right?
Yes, thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
world full of stories. How does one author make their book stand out from the rest? Book trailers for authors. Breathtaking movie-style trailers that bring your book to life. Stunning cinematic video, epic royalty-free music. Packages starting at less than $200. Book trailers for authors. Makes a great gift for the writer in your life. Find us on Facebook at Book Trailers for Authors.